Welcome, everyone, to the innovation series organized and supported by the London Business School Founder and Investor Club Hong Kong chapter. TIS are conversations with business leaders on innovation and disruption in their industry and how they assess, adopt, and implement innovation. Our very first guest is Violet Chen, head of China's Kingship business, a division of Mars Pet Care. She's an alumnus of London Business School with 10 plus years of experience in innovation across industries. Welcome, Violet.
Hi, LBS alum.
So let's start with a very basic question, and obviously would like to know about your background and where you started off and how you landed in kingship in China.
Yeah, I think I will backtrack my work experience. It's true that my throughout my entire career, my job has been related to innovation. I feel really fortunate to have a career path this way. So my current role is head of China in Kinship. Kinship is the newest division within Mars Pet Care. I think many people don't know that pet care is actually a much bigger business in a revenue sense for Mars, even though most people know Mars as a company through M&M and sneaker bars. So I'm very happy to join Kinship because it is really a Mars attempt to innovate and to try out new business models, including smart devices, DNA tests, and various of apps and websites. So in China, we're actually at the infancy of the Kinship business. I personally joined at the beginning of this year when I was still in Boston, and I flew back to Shanghai, and now we're sort of on track to really put our foot on the ground for in the pet care space for Kinship. Before I joined Kinship, my last job was at Irobot, the company that invented the product Roomba. It's also a category creator for the robotic in-home vacuum. So I did various jobs at Irobot. Most recently, I led a collaboration between Irobot and one of our sort of vendors to co-develop a new product line. And this is also a new category for the company. I actually had a lot of stories of how I pushed innovation from product innovation and to process innovation side. Before I joined iRobot, I was at a consultancy named Continuum. They're branded as innovation consultancy. What they do is a lot of the international or domestic corporations, sometimes they just need a new fresh eye to look at what is the new product that they should design and what might be the new service and business model that they could try out. So Continuum is one of the agencies that really help the company to develop ideas. So I stayed in Continuum for almost 6 years. So a lot of my processes and skill set of how to develop something from scratch or from just a piece of paper are really trained by Continuum. So far I had the experience of working in the consultancy side and working in sort of a large corporation that pushing new product ideas around. And my latest role,
Mhm.
I am sort of in charge of what do we do as a business and how do we grow. So it actually feels incredible to be able to try so many different roles, but all with this theme of innovation.
So I think it's a pertinent question for me to ask, what does innovation mean to you?
It's a really big question. I there's some at least I think from my current experience, innovation used to be about a new product development. And it could be just a iteration of your existing product line, or it's a creation of a brand new product line. So I think that's
Mm.
obviously a lot of people's job is about pushing that. But once you go further, the process of either developing the product or the sales and marketing method of launching the product can also be innovated. And I think most recently, a keyword that we all hear is just direct to consumer, because that really kind of e technology brand, FMCG brand, or even new startup brand are all thinking about what is the best way to go direct to consumer. So I think a lot of people's attention and mind share is captured by direct to consumer. And I think a
Mhm.
third sort of keyword within innovation now, for me at least, is strategic partnership. So, in a way, many times you don't have to do everything on your own. you could
Yeah.
leverage an existing resource of an existing partner, and you could either co-brand or co-develop and co-launch a new product and services using the best talents of each other and sort of share that traffic that you wouldn't have been able to get or too costly to get if you're doing it alone. So I think that's also a pretty interesting concept to explore. I think that's sort
Yeah.
of the three key innovation theme that I have personally experienced.
Let's talk about the pet care China market. It's a 30 billion market. So,
Mhm.
what's happening there? What is the competition? How is innovation? And more importantly, because this is a conversation we had earlier, I understand that for you also, innovation is the future of the company. And
Mhm.
so, what does Mars see so pertinent in the pet care business to be making such investments and strides?
Yeah, so first, I think the question is about the China pet care industry. As we said, it's 2019, the overall market size was 30 billion US dollar. From various of data source, sort of the most conservative data source predict that it grows at least 13% year on year. Some source
Hmm.
says it grows even faster. So it's definitely a rapidly growing industry. And I think another factor of the industry is 70%, 75% of the pet parents are millennial and Gen Z generation. So in Chinese, we're
Hmm.
calling them post 80, post 90, and sometimes post zero generation. So
Hmm.
it's a young people's business, so that understanding what young people care about and how do they shop, what's their decision making process is very important to win in the market. I think that's quite different than any other country in the world where across the demographics there are people who own pets, but in China really is a young people's market, even though there are still a lot of the older generation still have pets, but on the scale base it's much more towards younger. Currently, there are about 99 million cats and dogs, and it grows almost also at 10% rate. So it's about 10 million new cats and dogs coming to the market every year in terms of pet. And over 50% of them, so or let's say 45% of them are within year one or year two of their life. So they're really at their baby stage. The reason it is important is when you're a young pet, you don't really have a lot of health issues, and your parent don't really think about health because you're bubbly and you're
Hmm.
very young. However, we know that there's a huge potential when these young pets are growing older, when they get 8 years old and more than 8 year olds, a lot of the needs for the healthcare space will start to emerge. And that's when we will hopefully see a booming demand for healthcare related service and products. So that's the Chinese pet care sort of industry key elements. And I think another key mindset that really is driving so much attention to the industry is the changing mindset of the pet parents. So the middle class in China obviously are emerging. And at the moment, it's not just about sort of living, but it's always about living better and living more happily. So pet used
Hmm.
to be a toy that people think that, oh, I want to feel less lonely or I just want a good company. But once they adopt a pet, the pet becomes such an important member of the family and they put in so much emotional investment into the pet. They start to see the pet as their family member, most likely their babies, so that the willingness to pay for premium products and services are also growing. So that's
Hmm.
why the sort of per pet spending in China is growing also around 10%. So everyone is going to spend more and more on their pets. So I think that also kind of fuel the growth of the Chinese pet care industry. The third one is, I think the question was why Mars were paying attention to China. Obviously, we know that China has the largest population of middle class, so that it will be significant for FMCG in general. And like I said, it's a fast growing market, therefore, Mars is very interested. I think the third one that really changes how Mars see the industry is the significant venture capital investments that are
Hmm.
pouring into the pet care space. I think in 2012, back in 2012, there were only like 3 to 5 venture investments. Fast forward to today, or at least in 2019, the data was on average, even starting from 2018, on average, there are 40 different deals, venture deals happening in the space. So this is definitely helping to grow the market for new innovative products and services. And a lot of these venture capital funds, they are internationally operating. They see a lot of other general big consumption industries like beauty, mom and baby, and snacks. So they
Hmm.
generally select companies that operates just as if they're doing snack, or maybe they're doing human health products and services. So they're very innovative and in a way very ambitious as well. So I think that diversification of business models backed by venture is what we realize that we have to do something in China. Hence, the necessity of launching Kinship in China. So I think here I want to briefly talk about what Kinship does, so that I think that this also explains our thought process and business model. So
Hmm.
Kinship is, in a way, a new division that has at least three key assets that we operate upon. The first one is our own core businesses. So we are managing two very new business that Mars either incubated or acquired. One is a pet DNA test. We have already finished the R&D effort. The product is already live in the US and is capturing a lot of attention and sort of millennial pet parents wallet. It helps you fully understand what the pet breed is and what
Hmm.
might be the health risk of this pet breed and what explains their personality traits. So that's one DNA test. And then we have a health monitoring collar for dogs, that some of the collars also have the GPS device so that you know where the dog is and you know if the dog is happy or maybe the dog is sick. So these are the two core businesses that Kinship has. And our mission is sort of see if there's right opportunity to launch it in different parts of the world. The second resource Kinship has is a strategic venture fund. So the name is Companion Fund. It's a 100 million USD fund focusing on pet care startups. So with Companion Fund, we're able to collaborate largely with different type of businesses that even though they are not related to DNA or health monitoring. So we did invest in one company named Mollybox in China, and they are a creative direct to consumer subscription based e-commerce platform. So far it is going really well. But of course, Companion Fund is just one fund that invests in only a handful of companies. And we also developed an accelerator called Leap Accelerator that recruits 6 to 8 very innovative businesses around the globe I think every twice per year. And within Leap Acceleration, we can offer all the resources Mars have or Mars know of to help the company to quickly refine their business model or operating model. So this is largely three assets that Kinship has that we're hoping to make it work in China, but we also are working very closely with other brands within Mars. They're either pet food or hospital or sometimes even the snack brand. We have access to all these sort of sister companies that we could work with.
And that basically brings me to understand that how do you look at disruption, and how do you assess that this product line needs disruption or needs a new product? Because when you talk about doing the DNA test,
Mhm.
I recently did a DNA test myself from a startup in Hong Kong, and I get the value and I understand. But how would you know that pet parents themselves would like to spend?
There are generally sort of top down, bottoms up disruption. I think top down, generally, the
Hmm.
reason you're interested in DNA test as a corporation is definitely just the data and the depth of your understanding about your consumer. I think that understanding that data depth, the depth of data is very important for such a large corporation like Mars. Even though Mars has huge revenue, but when you're selling pet food, it's a very low engagement category. And usually the sales model is that you're selling it to a distributor who then distribute your products either online or offline. So you don't even know who bought your product. You have no idea how many pet parents that you're serving. And without that knowledge, you can't even innovate because you know so little. Hence, I think the birth of direct to consumer is important from the data perspective so that you can have a much closer engagement with your user and you know their pain point a lot better. So I think that's why they want to do this. And at our level, wanting to help the market to adopt such new product and services is really sort of a creative localization. I think no one is. It's true that DNA is such a new concept, and you have to connect it with a pain point that people are experiencing. And I think we will be using the idea from human on what exactly is making you wanting to know about your DNA information. So it may be, I think in the past I've seen you want to lose weight badly and you don't know what is the right way. You need a deeply personalized solution. And that's when you will spend huge amount of money on DNA tests, hoping that it will tell you exactly what you need to do. And for pets, we have to think about what that pain point is. I think that pain point is what triggers user to behavioral change. And of course, you have to fully deliver, you have to eliminate that pain point with the adoption of your product and service. For us, it's a really good question on the DNA test. We think that for China, it's just about people wanting to understand their pet better. It's not really a super painful point. Therefore, we have to think further on how do we make people tick. And I think that's the top-down approach. Bottoms up, I really think that it's directly related to user pain point and sort of the willingness to pay to eliminate that pain point is where you want to start and how you want to design the sets of features within your product to really address that pain point. And I think that that's important, at least from a hardware or a single product perspective. That will be the most single important factor that we have to look at.
And would you say being a leader in innovation is better off than being a secondary mover?
Throughout my career, I happen to be in the first mover always. So I always worked for companies that have invented a category. And generally, I think the market, so I think it's important for the first mover to recognize that there always will be a second mover. And I think the capital market rewards the second mover sometimes more generously, or in a way, the second mover gets the same attention that the first mover tried so hard to create, and sometimes get the investment to do just the same. So I think that's a painful recognition of the first mover realizing that the idea is worth nothing if you don't execute well. And I think it's really painful when you see the second mover executed your idea a lot better. And I think that really hurts. And I think that's why it's also a question related to, are you in China or are you in the States? Because intellectual property is taken very seriously outside of China. And people do, so for example, Irobot that I work for does sue people who they do see have violated their intellectual property. They took it very seriously, and that really protected them throughout the life of their company. But I think in China, from my experience interviewing the entrepreneurs and see if we can invest in them, they often just tell us, of course, we filed an IP, but that's more of a sort of we marked our IP, but we never intended to sue anyone with it. And so that's just an asset that they have, but it's not a weapon. And I think that's a really interesting way of thinking. And I think in China, it's true that everyone is pushed a lot harder in China. That you know that originality is not going to get you to the finishing line. You have to make sure that you're always a step ahead from your competitor. And a lot of times, I think once you invented something, you have to keep iterating it. And that iteration, sometimes the followers know how to iterate even better. So I think this is two very different quality of for entrepreneur that I think rarely it happens on the same person. It usually is on two different person. Either you're the inventor or you're the very shrewd iteration, execution focused management. So importance of the co-founders,
Yeah.
or at least the management that you could hire. And we also look at that and see if they could make that work.
How do you see the Chinese pet care market versus the Western pet care market?
Not that much different. If we start from the consumer needs, I think there's two fundamental differences that make the two markets different. Is the US market are mainly the pets came from adoption. I think rarely people go to a shop to buy a pet. I even tried to buy a
Okay.
pet when I was in Boston. I couldn't find one. I don't know how
Hmm.
to contact a breeder. The breeder has a really crappy website that I don't even know how to contact a breeder. However, the pet adoption service are very mature, and you can download an app and it works just like Tinder, and you just select the pet and then you try to go see the pet. In China, I think it's the other way around. The breeders are still quite active. Majority of the people still prefer to buy a pet than to adopt a pet, even though the adoption is coming as a trend. So I think that really changes how you get the pet, and it also changes what type of pet you get. In the US, if it comes from adoption, it really like nobody gets to control the breed type of the pet, and generally is a mixed breed. So that's why the DNA test matters, because they have to want to know what kind of breed that they're getting. In China,
Yeah.
is the breeder usually sells like the really famous breed, American short hair for cat, the teddy or for dog. So the breed in China is a lot more unified than the US. I think the second one is just the pet parents' mindset. I think right now in the US, the millennial generation pays so much attention on what they put inside their body. They really pay attention to the origin of the brand, the story of the brand, and sort of the belief of the brand. They're like, oh, I'm allergic to this, I'm
Yeah.
allergic to that. And sometimes they will, or like, I'm a vegetarian. So sometimes they will reflect that belief on their pet. So it does create a lot of space for alternative pet food brand. But that's not the case in China. I think people just want to buy sort of the most nutritious nutritious food for their pet, and brand plays a large factor. It has to come from a well-trusted origin and it's a well-trusted brand. As long as the brand hit those marks, kind of people admire those brands. So I think that's the two key differences. So that's on consumer needs. On the business landscape, I would say it's very different. I think the birth of e-commerce and sort of the e-commerce system, or let's say the super apps ecosystem, goes a lot wider than the United States. Facebook and Amazon don't tend to like they Facebook cannot do what Amazon does and vice versa. But in China, I think Tmall,
Yeah.
WeChat, or Alibaba, Tencent, JD, TikTok, a lot of them actually are right on top of each other. And they have created sort of the entire value chain of information and content, then converted to e-commerce and conversion. So I think that really changes how the business has to operate in China, because the customer acquisition cost is really high in China, even if you exist on Alibaba. So that drive a lot of brands to go on WeChat and to do direct to consumer traffic and convert directly on WeChat rather than going back on the Alibaba and JD. I think that's different. And the third one is, I think key difference is there are 66 million pet parents in China. There are 1.3 billion live on the internet. So that ratio of finding the target who is the pet parents is a really tough challenge. I think the US is like 90 million to 300 million. So that ratio is a lot less challenging. So that means
Okay.
once you really acquire a customer through all sorts of magic that you could pull, you really don't want to lose that person because it's so expensive to get and it's so difficult to attract the next one because there's always 66 out of the 1.3 billion. So that kind of drives company to have to expand to complete different categories in order to capture the user. So if you did food when you started, now you want to also do pet shop because you want to expand that lifetime value. And if you were originally a pet smart device, now you're doing food because food has the higher repurchase rates. So people will come back, repurchase. So I think this really drives the diversification of product portfolios that is really difficult for foreign investors to interpret and to trust. So that has been a challenge for me, as always, when I have to introduce a startup company from China that have done really well in one sector and now are in a complete different sector, are raising money, have the successful track record to prove it. So that I think the foreign investors don't tend to trust that, but Chinese investors kind of think that this is a really bold move and shows that the founder is ambitious and sort of brave to get to a new category, and they trust the founder who are able to hire the right talent to develop a new category. I think that is quite different.
How do you evaluate new products and processes?
I don't really have a specific process because it really comes from your business plan. So I think in general, your business plan have covered what is the user pain point, what is the industry trend that is making this product mature, and how did you develop your product that really delivers value, and what's your sales channel that could help you to supply the product. So I think we did look at all aspects and see if the company could hit all the marks with no obvious blind spot that they haven't even think about. I think it's okay that they have something that they're not at their best, but they recognize that and they know that they're raising money to solve that specific blind spot. So I think that's very important. I would say specifically for new category adoption, because I used to work for Irobot and Roomba has always been a product that people talk about. They find the idea really interesting, but they just don't buy it. So they're like, I don't know, I don't really need it. I actually think that, and it used to be, I think it used to be really troubling for Irobot to try to understand why are everybody talking about it, but not many people are buying it. And I think that's when they realized that the word of mouth of the product is very important. And it was also the user experience. So I think a key mindset that entrepreneurs needs to adopt is to always imagine that you're a car sales guy, and you should always try to talk to people who have no idea what the product does and see how they think about the product. So in a way, it makes product marketing a very fun job because you are in a way reinventing the story of the product. And in the case for iRobot, sometimes I think it should even drive the product development because people's perception really matters when you're designing product. And if the engineer want to follow their own structure and sort of put a lot of the engineering dollar or the material, expensive material on elements it doesn't matter to people, then that's a really unfortunate situation, which I think iRobot did have that problem for a long time. And I think that's if a founder could really talk to someone who has no idea and convince that person this thing could work and prove once this person tried the product and it does work, I think that's when we know that the category is mature. However, I think following that story, I think right now we're in the age where people tend to iterate their ideas. So it's also important for a company to launch their product, even though they don't fully understand, even though they understand that it's not the perfect product. It's important for them to get it out there because the real human condition really changes the type of pain point or the type of bugs that you would know in the lab or you would know when you're brainstorming, and that generally give you a huge amount of learnings for product iteration. So I think it will be, yeah, so there won't be a perfect product when we look at it, but we want to see if they have that process of iteration and their ability to their ability to iterate a product to fulfill the market needs.
What are the KPIs of an innovation team? Like, how do you assess bringing a product or bringing an idea into the company, looking for products, building it internally or externally, and then deploying it?
I think that's the brilliance of Kinship, is that it was not an innovation department. It is a business unit. So I think it's very important that it's only happens so that your task to do new things, to find a business that works. It should never be that you're called innovation team and you innovate because the company wants to be more innovative. So that's why I think I wouldn't say I would never, but
Yeah.
I would definitely think twice if the job is with the title innovation. I think that's a very difficult place to be in. Yeah, exactly. Because if you're not in the main business and you don't have your own P&L, then you don't really matter for the life of the business. Then you're always a nice to have. And I think that's a very dangerous situation to be in. Kinship functions like a business. So we have revenue targets.
Absolutely.
And I think for Kinship in particular, we know that our revenue will never be as huge as pet food, because that's just, the market demand is very different. What we care about is just the head count of pet parents and pet that we engage, and the level of data that we could gather with each individual pet parents. I think these two are the key KPI that makes Kinship different from other business, but this is no different from any other internet businesses.
This
Thank
was a
you.
great conversation, Violet. Thank you very much for your time.